little bit we left out in the last video. Let's go over that real quick.
So talking about the chosen, it's from Exodus 39 verses 8 to 14. So here in Stones Tanakh, let me read it in English. Here's the Hebrew on this side of the page. It's this whole first section here. This is the Stones Tanakh translation. He made the breastplate of a weaver's craft, like the workmanship of the ephod, of gold, turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, and then linen twisted. It was square, folded over, did they make the breastplate. Its length was a half a cubit, and its width was a half a cubit, folded over. They filled it with 4 rows of stones, a row of odum, pitah, and barakes, 1 row. The second row, nofetch, saphir, and yahalom. The third row, lashem, shivo, and achlama. The fourth row, tarsus, shoham, and yashpheh, encircled with gold settings in their mountings. The stones were according to the names of the sons of Israel, 12 according to their names, like the engraving of a signet ring, each man according to his name for the 12 tribes. So perhaps it wasn't a rectangular. If it was square, it would be more like this checkerboard, a square. And I'm pointing out this checkerboard for a reason, which we'll get to in a minute. But so it wasn't. It was a square thing, perhaps. Anyway, the point is this. What I just read was the English translation. This here is just an example of how I figure out what the words mean, what I would call cephering. I use a combination of Sepher. It's like the word sapphire or spire, which is one of the names of the stones, which is 2 words of the word for language, Samik Pei.
You mentioned Safa earlier.
Right, so that's Samik Pei Resh. That's right, Sefer the language. Which Sefer is also the word for book or scroll. But anyway, what I'm saying is that, so I try to see what's in the words. Techilit, blue. But there's a tav, the word call, which is all or every, and then another tav. So it's like within the bounds of the covenant is everything. That's one way to read that. But it's the word techilit, which is the color blue. This word kaf pei vav lamed means folded over, but it relates to the square that it is. And here's this word kaf pei vav lamed. So there's the kaf pei vav lamed, same word. Kaf can be a prefix that means like. And in the dictionary it says pei vav lamed is a bean or a gland. Well, that's kind of like the pineal gland, what they call the third eye. And it's like, does the third eye pineal gland have something to do with this? But it also means to multiply. Kaf pei he, this is kaf pei vav lamed, but that's just a related word with some of the letters, and it means to force, compel, invert, overturn. So that's the kaf pei, to overturn, and lamed is an authority. So you could say, does the analysis of that word have to do with an overwhelming force overturning something? Well, that's kind of like the force of a teeter-totter. Something's balanced to the point where if a heavy load is put on this, but then if a heavier load is put on that side, poof, it overturns. One of the words in this, way down here, mem, shin, bet, zadi, tav, literally means inlaid checkered work. Well, that's like a checkerboard. It also means dovetail joint, interwoven, or where you might do inlay work. So it's simply translated, oh, the stones were inlaid in gold. It's like, wait a second. Why does this word and that word bring about this image of a checkerboard where you've got these spaces next to those spaces, and then there's the idea that at some event, everything will change. What these guys have will become that, and what those guys have will become... It reminds me of that verse that it says that the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. And you said that was what, Isaiah 3 somewhere
Oh,
maybe?
I don't
We should
remember.
look that up.
I was just reading that the other day, though.
But the point
Consume
is,
the wealth of the Gentiles and such.
Yahuwah has plugged in as one of the factors of the great plan, that he's going to allow what he calls the wicked to store up this great wealth with all their efforts and endeavors. Somehow, whatever they're doing, and they're accumulating and amassing, and all of a sudden he's just going to take it and hand it to the righteous. Now the word righteous is zadikah. It also means victory, deliverance, and salvation. But we're not righteous by our own merits. It's doing what he said. That's righteousness. So somehow, and the word wickedness is causing and intending harm, which he said don't do, to your neighbor. So here's the thing. If you analyze words, he's going to take those who intend harm to their neighbors, and he's going to allow them to store up all this wealth, and then at some event, he's going to just take it and hand it to those people who regard his words doing kindness and truth to their neighbors. That's what he said. That's the plan. Now, why don't we see it happening? I think the answer is in these stones. 2 times that was, 3 times come to mind. Once was in Egypt. Under Joseph, he gathered up the wealth of all the neighboring countries because there was a famine. And then at the time of the Exodus of Moshe, a couple hundred years later, he took all the wealth of Egypt and handed it to the Israelites as they went into the desert.
It's a big score.
That was a pretty big score. There was another occasion where he let the Canaanites build cities, grow vineyards, harvest food, and then he says, now you guys go in, and I'm going to chase them out of the land and hand it to you. You will live in their houses, you will drink the wine from their tables, you will eat the bread from their fields. And because the Israelites said, no, we don't think that's true, he says, okay, it won't be true for you, it'll be your next generation.
Oh,
and it's like,
boy.
what? So what we imagine, and then there was another occasion where there was a siege against the city, I think it was Jerusalem, and there was a famine going on, and he gave Elijah, I believe it was, the word that he says, tomorrow at this time, the famine will be lifted, and you guys will have everything you need. And it's like, one guy said, no way! And Elijah said, okay, you'll see it, but you won't eat of it. And later on, from there, a couple leopards, 3 lepers, I think, said, we're dead, we're going to starve to death. Let's just go take our chances with the enemy camp. And they go down there, and Yahuwah had sent the sound of an army approaching. I mean, imagine if you heard clattering like right around the corner. You go, whoa! I mean, it sounds like somebody is just storming in. A rhinoceros is just busting through the wall. You're like, I'm out of here. I mean, it must have been a terrible sound. The entire army dropped and ran, and they left their stuff. Food and animals and provisions and armaments just scattered. They took off running to be picked up by the Israelites. Yahuwah can do anything, and he can flip this around. What, another occasion, 185 soldiers died overnight.
Yeah.
And all their provisions were given to his people. Another time, a 1,000,000-man army. We've talked about this before. Think of how long it takes to muster a 1,000,000-man army. If you have 1,000,000 men, there's 1,000,000 girls, so you have 2,000,000 children being born. That's going to take some time. They have to be trained, educated, exercised, learn the effects of war, harvest the food, build the equipment, get the carts, the provisions, bring it all to the battlefront. Mice got in overnight, ate the ropes and the straps, and all fell onto the ground, and they go, what? And they turned and ran. So here Yahweh had this other country get all this stuff, bring it to the door of Jerusalem, drop it, and turn and run. And he gave it to his people.
Oops.
He can do this. He's done it before. He'll do it again. And that's this picture that I see here where he, like the checkerboard, you think this is the staging? Just like that. He can flip it. Is that what this is about? So I will read to you, starting in verse 8, reading to verse 14. This is my study of these verses. So this concept of the breastplate was like a wristwatch, something that you wear which serves a purpose, functions to force an effect. This is what the word chosen means. It's arithmetic, calculates, thinks, is valuable, is a hand-built device, and it causes things to work. It's almost like a type of computer. I mean, was this chosen breastplate some type of a computer? I don't know, but transmogrifier, secret change object which activates. Okay. I will rescue according to the full scope of terms of the covenant between us. That's the color Techelet blue. I will mortar together a heap of stones situated to work like secret rituals. That's Argamon purple, arranged like an argument, woven organization, or some type of a circuit board. And crimson red, which means as a contrast, variance, and white linen cord twisted, interlaced. Verse 9, 2x squared, it's kind of this algebraic part of an equation. Square it is like inverted, overturned, x over y folded over. So you take something like this, and you fold it over, but then you fold it over again. It was folded twice. Like a pineal gland, third eye, make it the hosen, framed edge length and framed edge width, folded over. I'm just trying to read the words and see what is he trying to tell us. And remember, I read you what Stone's Tanakh said this means, and this is a completely different reading. Verse 10. It is fully fourfold, 4 row of stone arranged in lines. I will materialize line after line like a recipe, like a series of waves on the beach. I will be dim or shining, perplexing or clear, unfair or spectacular justice, the same as I am imagined to be. That was row 1. Row 2. The row second, the next wave of variance, difference, appearing as hatred, the monster. You will be examined closely to purify every drop, every speck, sifted, winnowed, sieved like grain flour. It's all on record, every detail accounted for and beaten accordingly, hammered as suitable. Verse 12, row 3. Row the third, mediating relay, how to arbitrate relationship. Return to the place of name. Repent. Be taken captive by my wish to restore health, cause recovery. Be taken captive by what's on his heart. Verse 13, row the fourth, like springtime fruitfulness. Poverty and weakness, beaten down, destroyed. They are retarded. Provisions have been delayed, omitted, late in arriving, held back. He will compensate. He will indemnify, just as he said, when language becomes sane, is restored, like putting a kettle over the fire, begins to heat up, the cause will have its effect. The circle turns. The spiral staircase ascends. The check has already been endorsed and becomes cashable. Transpose who has what. Shift on the checkerboard, the white space for the black space. Apoplexy, convulsion, overthrow. Verse 9 again, going back up there to the 2x. In other words, when he says fold it over and then fold it over again, is he saying, listen, I gave you the stuff, but you guys are going to be like idiots and lose the covenant. Boom, it's folded over, and everything I gave you was given to your enemy. Okay, that's what happened. Assyria took over, Babylon took over, but there's another event, folding over again. It's going to happen again. Everything shifts. He gives his stuff back to his people. Is that the message which is embedded within this concept? The picture of the checkerboard folded over twice? Who has the apoplexy? Well, there's a record that when they finally were able to determine the era of Moses and of Joseph in Egypt, at the time of the Exodus at Moses, they found that somebody, a scribe, had written What the heck is going on? The wealth of is given to slaves. Slave girls are wearing fine jewelry. Noble women who have no husband because everybody died. The firstborn are all dead. The pharaoh's dead. The army's dead. The crops are dead. The animals. What happened? Egypt was the preeminent empire, and suddenly it's devastated. And then the Amalekites come in, the Hyksos, and they what? What? And he goes on to say, if there was a God, if I knew who he was and where he was, I would worship him. Well, Yahuwah had just explained who he was through the 10 plagues, which we'll get to in the next video. But my point is, that's the apoplexy and convulsions that it's talking about here in verse 13. The staging will be accomplished finally. The word bet, spelled bet mem, is where you get bema, which is the highest place, the pulpit, which is a stage, which is he's staging the course of human history. You might say like pieces on a checkerboard, a chessboard, but we don't see that. But if we could believe that everything that's going on, he's staging, and a very significant event that he has planned all along is to let the wicked do all the labor and all their shenanigans and all their finagling and all their covert and conspiracy and all their evil deeds. But they're amassing this wealth, and he's just going to hand it to the people who regard his words and his name. Verse 14, this built of stones. Poverty is according to banishment for the sake of communication. He allowed the poverty of his people on purpose because they disregarded their promise to have fidelity, faithfulness to the covenant, to listening to his words. B'nai Israel, behold, here is gladness. The foundation structure for wealth is built for success. The 12 were banished, their names dead. My opening declares freedom. Set free, regain sight. At the conclusion of the subscription that was signed up for, sounds to me like the 2007 or 30-year curse that was over as of 2010. So here we are, man, any man, yoked to his name of any of the various confederated tribes. That's my translation of the same thing reread a moment ago.
It's a lot less boring.
Sounds quite a bit different. Now, I can't prove that I'm right and they're wrong, but all I'm doing is trying to analyze the spelling of words based on the fact that every word, every letter is a covenant, is an element, a component of the covenant, the Brit, that Yahuwah made with his people Israel, who he said, if you read my words, regard my words, keep my words, attend to my words, you will be to me my most treasured possession, because mine is the entire world's.
How could you forget all that stuff the last video?
We're down to 15 minutes. We're trying to do it in 10, so we
We're
just
at
didn't have
18
time.
minutes now, Eric. I see what you're doing.
If you
I
like
see what you're doing here. Oops, I forgot something. Maybe we
slipping.
should do a part 2. All right, brother. That was good. That was worth it. Hallelujah.